Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammy Mack on Fox Soul. I'm Tammy Mack. My guests today are Dr. O.J. Oleka, Dominique DePrima, and Alicia Cooper. So, Colin Kaepernick is launching a program called the Autopsy Initiative that will provide a free second autopsy for the families of people who died in police-related circumstances. Now, this initiative defines police-related deaths as those that occur when an individual is harmed by police officers while using deadly force, which results in the individual's death. So, what are your thoughts on Kaepernick's new initiative? This is quite something. This is something that could really be a game changer when it comes to policing, and particularly in Black neighborhoods, Dr. Oleka.
Well, we'll see what this is able to do. When you start getting into autopsy work, you need to get certain pieces of information. Obviously, from the coroner's office, you need medical records, you need stuff from law enforcement. I don't know that all of those agencies will be willing to cooperate with one Colin Kaepernick in his agency or his organization at the very least. I think there is some potential. People obviously have different opinions on whether or not police are responsible or not responsible for the deaths of everybody that are killed with police officers involved. With an autopsy, you can't really fake it one way or the other. So I'm curious to see how this goes. I wonder how many of these agencies will be cooperative and what the information can produce.
That's a good point. But I think that the agencies not being cooperative speaks volumes as well. Don't you think, Dominique?
It would speak volumes. And to your point, Tammy, a lot of families whose loved ones have been killed by police do end up springing for their own second autopsy. We've seen this in many, many cases, and often those autopsies conflict with the official report or raise questions that weren't raised before. Now, I don't know, how they're able to get those done because, as Dr. Oleka points out, you may need cooperation from other agencies and authorities. But so far, we have seen this work for several families whose loved ones have been killed. And then you got to figure there are many others who just simply can't afford to do that, to pay for their own autopsy. So I would imagine in those kinds of cases, if they're able to get it done as we've seen families do in the past, that this would be very important and may change the outcome of some cases. Of course, yes, there's lots of other moving parts, like district attorneys and whether or not they decide to bring charges against those officers and the like. But this is an important tool, and even though it seems oddly specific, I think it is a scenario that will end up helping some families that don't have the means to do so.
Alicia?
Yeah, this is another reason why I'm a fan of Colin Kaepernick. I didn't even realize that this was a big problem. And to alleviate these families that are already in the most stress they'll ever be in from a horrible death of a loved one, I think that what he's doing is amazing. And I used to work on the Dr. Phil show, and one thing he always famously said was, those who have nothing to hide nothing. So if you start hiding all this stuff, you automatically look guilty. And I hope that that plays better for a jury and what you were trying to do. And yeah, a second autopsy is just like a second opinion in the medical profession. You should always have one, especially because they work so incestuously together and have a hidden an agenda in keeping the truth from getting out.
Should this be, or is this retroactive? Is this for going forward, or do we go back and look? How should this happen? Like, is Colin Kaepernick gonna have his team look at these cases from decades ago?
I don't
How
know
do we
if they
feel
can
about
do
it?
that because they'd have to have the body. I mean, you can't do an autopsy without the body. I hope those folks are buried and
Well,
consecrated.
I guess I'm asking: are we exhuming bodies? Is that how far back are we going?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would imagine they're going to be dealing with current cases. Sadly, there are enough people being killed today in America, particularly Black people, by law enforcement, that they don't really have to go back.
Yeah.
Right. And if a case has been settled and then the cop was found not guilty because of double jeopardy, there's not much they can do at that point anyway. So I agree with Dominique. It's probably going forward.
One thing to look on this too, Tammy Mack, is state law. What do states allow non law enforcement or non medical agencies to even have access to? And again, Colin Kaepernick, despite what you may think about him, is a controversial figure. So if you have a Kaepernick-led organization trying to do different autopsies with the narrative that it's trying to say that police are not good, you may start to see some state legislatures outlaw that very kind of behavior.
But I think he's funding the families to do it, Dr. Oleka.
I
So it would
see.
actually be the family asking for the autopsy and Kaepernick paying for it.
That'd be very different.
Yeah. But my question is, how does this how does this help with the outcome of what a case was? Does it in any way show police guilty, or that the police had? I don't.
Sure, if the cause of death is in dispute, which it often is. Remember, even in the George Floyd case, they tried to say that he didn't die from being choked to death, that he died from drugs or some other,
That's true.
medical
Yeah.
condition that he had. A lot of times, the cause of death can be in dispute,
Great
and
example.
sometimes
Yeah.
the officer's story, if they said he was coming at me, but all the shots are in the back, for example, that kind of evidence that comes out in an autopsy can either support or undermine the official story.
And then do
Right.
we
Yeah. Yeah.
reopen these cases? I mean, it's like Alicia was saying, I'm not sure about this double jeopardy law you were referring to, Alicia, but do we reopen cases based on that? Is that
Well,
how
could
it would work, Dr. Oleka?
Well, what could happen, I know that Dominique has mentioned this before on the show. What could happen is you have a civil procedure. So basically, if you've got a charge that's levied against a law enforcement agency, so you killed this loved one of mine, the autopsy shows that they died some other way, there are no criminal charges filed. Well, they do a second autopsy, it's paid for. It turns out that autopsy has something different. If that becomes very credible in a civil case, and then what you can argue is a wrongful death type of lawsuit. And then all of a sudden, if you win that, then the city or the municipality or the law enforcement agency has to pay those damages to the family. So while you don't get necessarily a new case in terms of criminal charges against the specific members of law enforcement, you could get financial restitution to the family who lost their loved one. That's an expensive charge, obviously, from the city, but that could be a separate way of justice as opposed to a criminal action from law enforcement.
Yeah.
Or,
So,
or 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 maybe it could be elevated up to the federal level
hmm.
as an option.
That would be interesting. That would be interesting. Either way, I do believe that this is a game changer when it comes to um, Black people and the way that they are policed in America.